So I wanted to do something a bit different here. Um, I wanted to talk about the Mythic Item update in League of Legends, and particularly what I would have done differently. So first, my initial impressions. I think the Mythic Item update is okay. Obviously, things are horribly imbalanced. That tends to happen most preseasons in League. They'll get it ironed out quickly or slowly. It'll inevitably be fixed. I'm less concerned about things like Sunfire Cape and items like it being completely busted, and more concerned with sort of like the design of the items. A lot of the items are pretty bland. Like the Sunfire line I just described is really bland. Some of them are fun. You know, Duskblade's kind of fun. Gore Drinker is something I like quite a bit. Some of them are really flat. So Trinity Force and Trinity Force 2.0, aka Divine Sunder, really flat, almost nothing changed. I don't know why they also made a second Trinity. The 80 carry items are really flat as well, so there's just like a lot of flat, underwhelming items in here. But there are also some fun ones. So, again, like I said, it's sort of a mixed bag. But there are definitely some problems. So, what are the main problems with the Mythic Item update? Again, ignoring the current balance. So, the number one problem I'd say are botched builds. And there are a couple components to this. So, first of all, there are cases where in your build, the mythic item is not the optimal first item. So, like, particularly with people who build Blade the Rune King. You know, Aurelia, Set. You, particularly with Aurelia, I have a lot of familiarity there. You do not want to build Trinity first. If you check the statistics on a site like u.gg, her win rate just goes down. If you end up building Trinity first, you had to go Blade the Rune King, then Trinity Force. And this is a problem because Aurelia is sort of needlessly punished due to what essentially amounts to an oversight on their part. I'm sure Riot knew that certain people were going to sort of draw the short straw here. But it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That certain characters, same with like Ezreal, has to build Manamune. They're like needlessly weak in the current system because they're delaying purchasing their inherently overpowered item, right? So if you can't go a mythic item first, you're just weaker. And it was Riot's job to essentially ensure that everyone gets a starting item, but they just ignored certain common starting items for the mythics. So the number one item I would say again is Blade the Rune King. So you have some of the fighters I mentioned, then you have 80 carries as well. So Callista, Lucian, Vayne, Ashe, all these characters used to go very commonly Blade the Rune King first. And now that's simply not an option, or it's a much weaker option relative to starting a mythic. Now, these characters can opt to go something like Kraken Slayer for something of a similar effect, but there is no replacement for a character like Aurelia. She has to go Blade the Rune King, and even if they end up bouncing it, Aurelia will just be essentially overpowered but weak with the new system. Like the system should serve the characters. It shouldn't be the characters are in service of the system. And, you know, you have to overtune Aurelia just because she can't start a mythic item. And the solution here is not to just make Blade of the Rune King a mythic, but I'll get to that. So another aspect of botching the builds is cases where the mythic item might be situational. So sticking with Aurelia, Aurelia had build diversity in prior patches, so you'd almost always start Blade of the Rune King, but then you had options. You could go Trinity Force was the most common, but Wit's End was also very common. Black Cleaver was another common option. And then after that, you had options. You know, you could go one of the items I just listed that you didn't go a second item. Probably not Trinity, but Black Cleaver and Wit's End were very common. Death's Dance was the most common. You could even go Death's Dance second item. So you had choices. Now it's Blade of the Rune King, Trinity. That's it. There is no alternative. So, A, you reduce build diversity. B, it's not like you can go Blade of the Rune King, Wit's End, or Trinity, you know, depending on the game state. Like, they have a bunch of magic users. I'm going to go Wit's End after. That's essentially no longer an option. Like, you're going to be very statistically weak if you don't have your mythic item at least by the second item. And again, you have to start Blade of the Rune King. And the only mythic that works is Trinity. So, guess what? Every game you're going Trinity Force. Even if before it was situational, and even if now build diversity is greatly cut. So that's like the botching of the builds. The second thing are the mythic items. The mythic update sort of predefines your core items. So they tried to pick starting items and items that were otherwise sort of what they deemed core items in a build and make those the mythic items, but they missed the mark. So again, sticking with someone like Aurelia, Trinity was not Aurelia's core item. It was Blade of the Rune King. Blade of the Rune King was Aurelia's defining item. Spellblade was nice. It wasn't necessary. You didn't even have to go Trinity every game. And there are other characters that I'm sure are like this as well. So take a character like Kayn. So you would go the jungle item, and then you could go Duskblade, but I think the most common was Ghostblade as opposed to Duskblade. And you could go the other one next, or you could skip something like Duskblade. You might end up going, you know, the warrior jungle item into Ghostblade, into Edge of Night, into something else. You might not ever build Duskblade. Well, now you have to build it. You absolutely have to build it. There's no way around it. And I don't think it was as defining as something like Ghostblade was on Kayn, because it let you move faster. Your Q cast speed scales with move speed. You know, you're like zooming through walls and stuff. Like, there was a lot of synergy there. But now you're just Duskblade like everyone else, because the majority would prefer Duskblade to be the mythic. So, tough cookies. So I don't think that's a very good solution. Third thing, there's a potential for an overwhelming spike. So obviously the mythics are overtuned by design. They've said as much themselves. And, you know, if you finish your mythic first, I mean, someone's going to finish it first, right? Chances are both players are not going to have their mythics at the same time. And this can lead to an overwhelming spike. I don't think there's anything too terrible in the game right now, but we'll see. And you could say this isn't necessarily a problem, but at the very least, it goes against their design philosophy because they intentionally rid BF Sword from any of the potential components of the 80 carry mythics. And their logic was, oh, if one carry banks first bank and gets a BF Sword and the other carry doesn't, that's too punishing. That's too big a spike too early in the game. We don't like that. That's why there's, daggers, or a dagger, and long swords, and things like that. Cheaper components in an item like Kraken Slayer, right? There's a pickaxe, alacrity, 600 gold. It's very easy to afford something or multiple things. But then, what about the mythic item spike? Is that okay? It just seems hypocritical and poorly thought out. And the last thing I'll mention is you have limited options. And this is by design. So you got 3 mythics. That's it. For your options. As like an 80 carry, it's like, are you going Krakens, Shield Bow, or Gale Force? And this is about as much diversity as you will ever get. And that's assuming that your character even works with something like Krakens. Someone like Jin does not want Kraken Slayer. He does not auto enough to make it worth it. Unless the item is like horribly overtuned. It will just not be a viable option on him. So it really is 2 options. And before he might have had more. Not necessarily true of every character, but as metas shift, Manamune was becoming a very popular item among 80 carries. I mean, just look at Ashe. Look at the diversity Ashe had just in the starting item. There's Blade of the Rune King, like I mentioned earlier. There's Manamune. There was Infinity Edge. There was Essence Reaver. That's 4 items. 4 potential items. Blade of the Rune King, Manamune, Infinity Edge, Essence Reaver. That she could have started prior. Now it's a max of 3 between the 3 mythics. And really there's going to be a best option there. I would say almost inevitably it's going to be, Shield Bow or Kraken Slayer. Almost no one goes Gale Force. So in terms of what people actually build, it's down to 2. So you've halved it. And that's about as good as it gets, is 2. A lot of other characters, there's 1 choice and 1 choice only. So you're limited by design, and it can only be a limiting factor. I don't think anyone's build pool was expanded by the mythics. Certainly not for their first purchase. So those are the problems. And here's what I would have done differently with the mythic update. Now, they're never going to do this because they've already invested time, the money, the assets. It's not going to happen. However, what I would have done is I would have let the player choose any item. So like any legendary item. There are no default mythic items. Any legendary item. Dustblade, Ghostblade, Infinity Edge, Essence Reaver, any item. As their mythic item. And the way it works is at 20 minutes you choose your mythic item. And that becomes your mythic for the rest of the game. So why 20 minutes? Well, I was looking at various characters. So I looked at like Ez, Zed, some other characters. And usually the first item was built around 11 to 12 minutes. And the second item was built around 19 minutes. So typically, even if you build an item first, you don't want to be your defining item. You want it to be the second. you will have already completed it or be well on the way to completing it. So you're not needlessly punished for building your non-defining item, your non-mythic item in a way, as your first item. So like you want Trinity to be your mythic on as, you build Manamune first, that's okay. Not everyone is running around with a mythic while you have Manamune. And some people are left out here, aka supports. I saw their second item being built like 26 minutes in, so they would almost be locked into making their first item their mythic. I don't know if they can make their warding item a mythic. Maybe that's sort of a way to cheat it, but that's the best I could come up with. So what does it solve? So just going down the list again, the current mythic system botched the builds. So in cases where your mythic wasn't the first, you're needlessly punished. I addressed that. Now it doesn't matter. It could be your first item or your second item. You'll probably have both completed by the time you can choose your mythic. So you're not punished by the system. And then where the mythic was situational, again, the mythics aren't predefined, so it doesn't have to matter. You don't have to go Trinity. Trinity isn't the only mythic. It could be anything. It could be Blade of the Rune King. On Aurelia, you could make Wit's End the mythic if they have like 4 AP. It's up to you. So for the second main point, the predefined core items, now it's not predefined. So again, back to Aurelia. Trinity Force doesn't have to be your mythic. Now, Blade of the Rune King can be your mythic. You can say, this is the item I really care about. This is going to be my mythic item. And maybe you still go Blade of the Rune King Trinity. But maybe you don't. You're not locked into it. You can go Blade of the Rune King Wit's End, Blade of the Rune King Death's Dance, Blade of the Rune King Blank Cleaver. You can do whatever you want. And any of those items can be your mythic items. Maybe you're against a bunch of tanks. So you go Blade of the Rune King Black Cleaver, and you make Black Cleaver your mythic this game. It just gives you more options, and it doesn't predefine your core item. You get to decide what the core item is. And I think that would be a lot better. So the potential for an overwhelming spike is obviously gone because everyone gets their mythic at exactly the same time. 20 minutes. And then you're not limited by design. Whatever you want can be your mythic. So you can have people go the exact same build, but changing the mythic changes everything. So let's say you're playing Jhin and you go IE rapid fire, I don't know. Or you know what, here's an multiple, or build multiple people went, like Essence Reaver, IE, rapid fire, right? So Jhin could go that build, but also previously MF could go that build. So on Jhin, you say, okay, you know what, Infinity Edge is going to be my mythic, and I'm just going to make my crits do crazy damage. They're going to be insane, right? So you get like a ton of AD, you get even more critical strike damage. Maybe that's the mythic passive. You know, it just further increases critical strike damage. So you are like the critical strike guy, you know, where as MF goes the exact same build, but maybe she makes the Essence Reaver her mythic item. So maybe she gets more CDR. Maybe she gets like a cool passive, like she gets the Shoji's kind of passive where every auto attack or maybe every crit you make it like whatever that new item is. Quick Blade, I think. Novori Quick Blade, something like that. Make it reduce your cooldowns. You know, something like that. So you could have the same build, choose a different mythic, all of a sudden it's like an entirely new build. You define your build by whatever item you want, right? And that would be a lot better. So, you know, maybe set also goes Blade of the Rune King, Trinity, just like an Aurelia might, but he makes Trinity the Mythic. So he does, you know, even more burst. He has an even greater diversity of stats. And in terms of like what the Mythic would do, like it's easy to say, just make everything a Mythic, but what does that mean? I would make it sort of like Ornn upgrades, you know, like it just sort of gives stats based on the existing stats on the item already. Then maybe I would definitely have it lean into whatever the item's identity is. So again, i.e. more critical strike damage. Definitely that would be its mythic passive, is, you know, just more crit damage. And then something like Shield Bow, you could have be a legendary item, but then if you make it mythic, the shield is just massive, right? So it's like, oh wow, I'm really committed to surviving. Because even with the old items, another common build would be like Essence Reaver, i.e. PD, right? Phantom Dancer. So one person might make the IE, the mythic, I want to do maximum damage, I want to do big crits, etc. But someone else, maybe even the same character, just a different game, there's a lot of assassins. Hey, I'm going to make Phantom Dancer my mythic, and it's really going to make that shield huge, right? So you could do that for an item like Shield Bow if you wanted to keep the current items the way they were. So it's like, this game I'm going to have a huge shield, or you make Krakens your mythic, you know, this game I'm just going to do like a ton of true damage, right? You might go Kraken mythic over IE based on, you know, how much armor they're stacking. So that's how it would work. Those are the existing problems with the current system. That's what I would have done to solve it. I think it would be a lot healthier for the game. I think it would be way cooler to, you know, just choose whatever mythic you want. The builds wouldn't be botched. The game wouldn't be making choices for you. You'd avoid a lot of the current pitfalls, like potential overwhelming spikes and stuff like that. And it's sort of like a limitless system. It's you know, you play a game like Magic the Gathering or something, you can really just construct your own deck, make your own play style, and you can do some really unique things. Sometimes it's going to be broken, and, you know, they're going to have to fix that when it arises, obviously. But, you know, if all the decks in Magic the Gathering were predefined, that would be really boring. You know, the creators just come up with whatever they can. I mean, I'm sure Riot did some of the best work they could have, but it just pales in comparison to having that, what I'm again dubbing like a limitless system. Just let the players go wild, let any item be a mythic. And I don't think it would be that much work, right? Increasing stats relative to the stats that are already there. I mean, the blueprint's right there. And, you know, the mythic passives, again, it's just, you know, this item gives a shield, it gives, you know, supercharged the shield, right? This item has, you know, Sunfire Cape, AoE burn. Baby, make it burn, right? Make the burn huge. So, yeah. Those are some problems with the current update. Those are the things I would have done to change it. And let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.